Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is going to be fun.
Yep.
Awkward, but fun. It's going to
But we'll do our best on that one.
Yes. I think the defining factor is understanding that your org design, your incentive structures actually come in the way of the urgency with which some of those new acts need to be validated. The 0 to 1 motion needs to be validated before you actually put that into the scaled organization. And being able to tackle that with that cleverness, I think is the most defining characteristic. Whether if you do it too slowly, then it'll just fizzle out. And those second acts never come to fruition. But I think what we are seeing, we are in the middle of is that rapid experimentation phase where that all the urgency around innovation is going to quickly shift to the urgency around monetization that really needs to happen because it's essential for your own survival to be able to thrive in a new world, because you have to figure out that fair value exchange with your customer.
Welcome. This is Second Acts, a podcast where we document how SaaS leaders chart the chaotic, challenging, ultimately foundational second acts of scaling products, business models, and organizations. And I'm your host, Krish Subramanian, co-founder and CEO at Chargebee. I'm excited to be back with the second season of the show. Aside from our regular focus on how the best SaaS teams layer new S-curves of growth, in this season, of course, we'll be exploring how AI is producing urgent, never-before-seen second act across categories, and the role that reinventing monetization is playing within that. For this first episode, we are flipping mics, as they say. I'm the guest interviewing myself. No, I'm kidding. I had the pleasure of being interviewed by Chargebee CMO, Guy Marion. Guy is a SaaS founder himself who previously founded Brightback and another company before that, and has had amazing operational roles before joining Chargebee in 2022, and which today forms a core of our retention product and our price experimentation engine. We talked about a characteristic trait of companies that get second acts right. A bunch of wide-ranging topics all the way from the urgency around AI innovation, billing's ever-expansive role in the modern revenue stack, how we think about inspired problems at Chargebee, and why I'm consistently tempted to become a chief of staff at some of the most amazing companies that we serve that treat pricing as a science. Remote distributed melting pot of an org that we have built, how the partner build buy framework informs our product mix, why we built even a time machine, and so much more. I felt that this was a wide-ranging chat on many subjects that I constantly think about, and it was also fun and moving trip down the Chargebee memory lane. When we recorded this, we had just hit 13 years as a business. Yes, we have been at it for a while, and it was a great way to look back on some of our own second acts of scale, and also to realize how we are just getting started on many others. Dive right in. And if you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And if you really like this conversation, do drop us a review, please. I would really appreciate it. Thank you for listening.
Welcome, everybody, and we're glad to have you here today for an exciting conversation that I've been looking forward to for a long time. Krish, you're the founder for 13 years of Chargebee, and you've recently, or actually in the last year, kicked off and started doing your Second Acts podcast. So it's a real pleasure to turn the table and be able to put the spotlight on you actually today. Thank you for giving me the opportunity and for all of us.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. This is going to be fun.
Yep.
Awkward, but fun. It's going to
But we'll do our best on that one.
Yes.
Well, listen, I'm going to turn this to you. Normally, when you have guests come in, you ask them a little bit about their business, and I'm going to ask a variation of that. So how would you describe Chargebee 5 years ago, and where do you see that description changing 5 years from now?
Okay.
Just to start with a little question.
That's a heavy one. Okay. How did we describe it? Even 5 or 10 years back was the framing of the problem through the customer's lens was, it was seen as a recurring payments problem, right? Recurring billing, recurring payments problem in a very through a narrow lens, right? The simplest way to think about it is I have a pricing page, I have 3 plans, and I'm just going to accept money on a monthly or annual basis. It was that simple. And then you would describe the problem through that lens of how the customer understood the problem. I think just as an industry in subscription has always existed for 150 years, ever since I think mill subscription or newspaper subscription.
Magazines, right? Newspapers, yeah.
Right, all of that. So that is not new. But in the context of software and SaaS, it has evolved a lot. And then the maturity cycle that we have been going through, I think that the significance of the problem and what this category of that feature product is supposed to do has evolved quite a bit. And then over time, the last 5 years, we have called it subscription management and billing to also define the emphasis on, hey, there is more to that customer subscriber management to understand that intelligence around understanding your own customers more deeply, and then also inform the choices that you make in your pricing and billing. But there is increased appreciation for how the customers now look at the problem, right? It does not require that much level of education about where does it sit between the CRM and accounting system, right? The billing as a category now is coming off on its own. Like today, we are able to describe it as billing, and to a large degree, it's actually understood, where it's no longer a build versus buy argument with the CTO's office, right? It's like, yeah, I don't want to do it, but what's the scope is a conversation. But I think that the later part of your question is a tricky one to answer because of what's actually happening with AI and all of that, right? The economics of software or the value exchange is changing significantly, right? Because in subscriptions, typically we have seen this as, at least in SaaS world, okay, so access to software, monthly plans, and you try to capture that value. And it's a fair value exchange. And the only shift from the old installed software world, from the Oracle, SAP, Ariba days was that, okay, you are buying software that you could actually make it your own, and to now saying access to software in the SaaS world. But what very quickly it's now evolving into the value exchange to output, outcome, usage, and access, right? But the access part is going to change. So it's a tricky one to actually answer, in my view, to say how will we describe it in the future. I think it's still going to be anchored around the revenue monetization and facilitating that fair value exchange between the two parties. Mm-hmm. But I think billing as a term, I think will continue to persist.
Yep.
But it's just going to be a much more expansive lens. I think is going to evolve very quickly, because look at the scope of what we all facilitate today, right? Even if we don't own all of it, but the middle of the workflow, it's actually not just the billing. There is also tax. Then there is a whole aspect of payments, and then even the downstream CFO's office problems. And then there's a whole aspect of facilitating growth, right? That as a primary thing is actually what's happening. And now the AI-driven monetization of AI is actually dominating the conversation a lot more, because monetization of the innovation with AI is now, we are in the middle of that right now. And very quickly, people are experimenting, but it's going to evolve really, really fast in the next 3 years.
Right.
So it's a tough one for me to answer.
These are definitely interesting times. Pricing has often been described as sort of the exchange rate between the value that a customer gets and the cost it takes to deliver. And I think both the cost to deliver and the value and how companies and people are now recognizing value is going through dramatic shifts.
Right.
So pricing is going to...
I will actually differ there is not the cost, right? It's not like cost plus margin model, right? So the slight difference I say is the price is perception of value and capturing of value rather than the cost aspect. The cost does play a role, but I think the smart relationships actually have a little bit more than that, because the cost means assigns it to the specific to the product and the service, right? It's not like a manufacturing world of activity-based costing, right?
Right.
But even though with AI, it's actually moving more and more in that direction to actually, with the convergence of SaaS and services. I think somewhere in between is the right answer in that value exchange.
In the value exchange, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and cost profiles are varying a lot right now. So, good. Well, we'll come back to the future, because I think as this conversation goes on, there's a lot more that I'm sure I'd love to dig into with you on that front. Let's go back to a few years ago. A few years ago, I was actually I was preparing for a webinar with the CEO of one of the main billing players in the space, actually, when we were pre-Chargebee. And I asked him one day, how do you see the landscape? How do you see each of the different competitors and players? And he commented on a few, and he said, the one company that I really want to know what they're doing is Chargebee. He says they're the ones who've grown so fast, they're innovating, they've seemed to be outgrowing everybody else. And he said, I want to know who's doing their marketing, because whatever it is, they are growing faster than everybody else. How would you describe what you did and what the company did early on that enabled you and Chargebee to sort of break out of this growth space, as the whole subscription industry and billing were in that transition, as you said, from sort of build versus buy and mainstream adoption, and Chargebee really took off? Any specifics that you want to share?
Sure.
Share with me. I'm curious.
Now that you are the one who is driving marketing. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I would love to know to send a thank you note who that is. I think what have we done differently? Is that the question?
Yeah.
One of the defining traits I think has been to deliberately flip the script through the lens of a. So we are not coming from the as founders as well as a team, right? The anchoring has always been through the lens of looking at everything through the lens of a customer, which has been the only way we have known how to actually build these things, and also like make most decisions. Mm-hmm. I think when it comes to the content, because of the constraint of actually building a company where the heritage of the company is from Chennai, India, and most of the customers are between North America, Europe, which is 90% of the customer base. I think we learned from the playbook of HubSpot when it comes to how to do inbound marketing. And inbound marketing was always not about you, it's about the problem. I think that has served us well when it comes to the strong anchoring to make sure that we are not focusing on ourselves. It's actually about the focus on a problem. And then that continues to shift through the lens of a customer. The definition of the problem or what is it that they are dealing with at this point in time is very contextual, whether it's based on the location of the customer, like a valley customers, like companies in the valley. Mm-hmm. Actually, even though they are all building in the same space, they deal with it very differently because of the ecosystem that exists. It's very different from the rest of the valley, right? Even with entrepreneurs within US actually look at it that way. Like it's the valley companies and the non-valley companies. Mm-hmm. And then you put it in the perspective of a European company, it's actually very different. Straight off the bat, right? By the time you get to $1 million, most European companies actually start with multiple currencies. Straight away, they have always cared about making sure that the taxes are actually charged because that's just a way of life here. Mm-hmm. And when you try to solve the problem through the lens of this global customer base, there is no choice but to actually anchor around what matters to that customer. And obviously, you tend to talk about it. I think that is one thing that has served us well to continuously obsess about what matters to that customer and then frame everything through the lens of that customer I think has been the thing that has helped define why we do what we do.
Yep, makes sense. And you've often mentioned staying focused and obsessing over a key customer problem. And I would say coming in, it was very clear to me that Chargebee has been very focused on understanding, obsessing the needs of those customers, and then driving all focus in terms of the product experience and the features you're developing and how you're marketing to that and building content for that persona, and then providing an onboarding and an experience to work with Chargebee in a way that is relevant and optimal for that customer. Like, how did that focus come about? Like, did you initially say we want to focus on this portion of the market or this portion of the market and ensure that that's an experience, or was it more you recognized where the industry was evolving and you listened to the sets of problems and you responded to the needs as they came up?
See, we talk about it as companies that are either market heavy on marketing front, right, or on the product-led, marketing-led, sales-led type of companies. Similarly, I think the founders and then the DNA of the company also gets shaped by your own core strength. Some are very technology-led, some are market-led, some are customer-led. I think for us, and you also have to find the balance between all three at different points in time, but your core strength is actually one of these three generally, right? If you look at almost any company in the world, you will find that you will be able to stereotype them around like one versus the other in terms of how they actually operate or make decisions. I think for us, the natural strength has been through the lens of a customer because of like constraints is a key factor when it comes to what shapes your worldview or how you make decisions. And for us, building a company remotely where you are located much further away from the customers and the market, but technology part is democratized, right? And then the grounding of where you learned how to build products matters, right? Whether you do technology for the sake of technology, where that's a cool factor that defines how you actually approach the problem, or do you actually approach it through the lens of a customer? For us, the grounding has always been through the lens of a customer to break it down and understand and even pick a problem. And I think that's just thanks to wherever we worked, right? My co-founders come from Zoho, right? And I come from services industry, but implementing products. So that has just been the natural inclination of actually thinking about it through the lens of a customer-centric worldview of how to process any information. And then that leads to a set of choices and how we build things. Does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah, that's good. That is very on the point. So let's talk a little bit about shifting gears in terms of today. So today, we've drawn on some of the experiences you've drawn on experiences with early stage companies, right? Finding product market fit, getting to initial traction, and then scaling go to market. What would you say are sort of the defining pillars of the second act for companies that have reached scale, they're expanding globally, and are now recognizing there's a shift in the next act that needs to occur? What are some of the traits you've identified there and the key pillars of the second act?
All right. Yeah. See, first is definition of a second act, right? Or why there is a need for a second act, right? Which is, I think the answer is Nick Mehta and I were discussing this about the S-curves, right? There is a beautiful article about the importance of actually layering the S-curves and continuously investing in that, right? And there is a beautiful article for that. I think we should share that as a reference.
Yep.
So a second act is basically recognizing that when you are actually hitting that, you are extracting the benefit of scale through any one of these acts, which is PLG motion, your product-led motion or a sales-led motion, whether it's inbound marketing, outbound marketing, or a partner-led motion. Every one of these things actually gives you that momentum and a pull in the market. And then by the time you actually run out of steam where the growth plateaus, and then the growth will plateau with every one of these acts at different points in time, you actually are trying to find that one more lever that you can layer over that actually gives you that layering of that momentum. And then the next one also takes over. And then there is also compounding that happens because of the benefit of these two. It could be introduction of a new product that you can actually sell to your existing customer base, or introduction of a new product that actually gives you completely new logos, which facilitates upsell, cross-sell, right? It could be any of these things is what we are calling as the second acts, right? And then there is also the complete reinvention needed where you have hit scale and then suddenly you carry a target on your back. And then there is a lot of innovators coming from taking a different lens through which they are actually looking at the problem and then looking at you as one of the main competitors, right, as the incumbent. And then all of this requires you to actually completely reinvent yourself to invest in that second act. Defining trait is, I think, approaching that with a beginner's mindset to do that with urgency, I think, is the biggest difference. Because pretty much everybody recognizes these things, but how you go about it matters, right? Because the scaled organization as a missionary is very much driven, in my opinion, through incentives. The incentives have a huge role to play when it comes to whether you do something or the things that you do or the things that you don't do, right? And there is natural inertia to certain types of decision making that actually comes in the way of attaining those goals with urgency, right? And we also tend to assume that a certain deliberate slowness is necessary if you want to do certain things well. And that is also a myth, right? Meaning it's not absolute truth. I think the defining factor is understanding that your org design, your incentive structures actually come in the way of the urgency with which some of those new acts need to be validated. The 0 to 1 motion needs to be validated before you actually put that into the scaled organization. And being able to tackle that with that cleverness, I think, is the most defining characteristic. Whether if you do it too slowly, then it will just fizzle out and those second acts never come to fruition, right? But if you actually create that, facilitate that within the company, and you don't want to create a situation like, for example, naming it as innovation lab, where that's not the only place where you build new products. Then the large organization is also innovating. There is micro innovation, then there is continuous innovation that's happening in your larger product with your customers. That co-innovation also happens. Even a simple label like innovation lab actually makes it look like that's a shiny new object, and everybody wants to be part of that. And then it actually colors certain things inside the company. I think the defining trait is also some of these little things and how to use the strength of a large organization while you're also investing in those newer motions and facilitating to drive the growth in the company for these different types of motions. I think is the most defining characteristics of founders who are able to pull it off, versus the ones who are actually struggling to make certain things work. And by the way, it's not like one thing, right? Which is some founders are very heavily product focused. Some actually have grown up in marketing or a go-to-market organization, and these second acts are required across the organization in many ways, right? Including org building, org design. You need that. So it's actually muscle memory that's built over time for various things, but it's a question of noticing where you are actually able to do, where we are actually having to go through that learning motion. I think it makes a big difference.
Got it. So to summarize, you've mentioned the S curves, and we'll put a reference in there, but companies sort of find that initial ramp. They accelerate rapidly through post-initial traction to scaling. They have a peak rate of growth. Then they start to slow down as they sort of expend the growth horizon that they're on until eventually you kind of achieve some flattening. And the next horizon would be the next S curve you jump on that in sum keeps you continuously growing. And one of the things you said is this beginner's mindset, which you've institutionalized at Chargebee. We have curiosity as one of our core values, and it's something that really permeates across the business. And I think that that's a great takeaway. And I think that's one of the differentiators of founder-led businesses still is that curiosity, beginner mindset, where you're looking at every problem, looking at how to improve it in an honest and transparent way. And I think that is and you've mentioned this, how that manifests with new products, right? You've acquired businesses and with org design and what works and hasn't worked. So I think there's some really great takeaways there as sort of companies are thinking about that next act, new products, new markets, new customers, org design, but moreover, taking that beginner's mindset.
Yeah, I think when you mentioned about the institutionalized, I think it's we look at it as, okay, it's a strong emphasis, right? Because even for every one of us, it requires a constant reminder. It serves as a constant reminder when you put certain things as value or an operating principle that, okay, there are moments when we all fall into the trap of actually falling off from that, but continuous reminder to say, okay, are you judging that moment to say or using your experience as something to actually inform the choices you are making, versus is it becoming a baggage, right? Every pattern matching actually serves as one or the other. So I look at it as a constant reminder on a continuous basis where we put it as a value of the company to say, okay.
It's better said. Constant reminder, not institutionalized. That by itself is even a Krish statement. So not to put you on the spot, but let's, you've talked about the company, but how about yourself just for a moment? You know, like your own founder journey and how you have evolved over time. Like what would you see? And I know you don't like to spend too much time talking about yourself, so I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but what have been some of the key differences you've felt along the way or the evolution for you that's allowed you to continue to grow a globally fast-growing business?
Let me put it this way, right? When you say you, I think I look at it as, okay, the core group of folks. Like, I think when we started it, I don't think we even ever, we didn't start with this. Like, I like one statement from Girish, founder of Freshworks, saying this, right? He said, put it very nicely to say, we like to dream in installments. That's a very defining statement for people of different cultural backgrounds, right? I actually embrace it in a particular way because I come from a background where when we started, it was more from the lens to say, how did we even start, right? It was a 10-year dream to say, hey, we want to learn how to build a product company. We looked outside the world. There were some some amazing people who wrote about the journey of building companies, like a Joel Spolsky, quitting his job as a Microsoft product manager to start Fog Creek Software, makers of Trello, right? But the thing for us was fascinating when early days as a software engineer was I used to look forward to reading his article every week, right? And early days of internet, like exposure, at least for folks like me, and I used to exchange notes with the co-founders. So there is a certain level of gratefulness for people who actually publish these things outside. And then you nurture your dream to want to start. And at some point, right, you are having a good career, and it's not because you don't like your job. I actually really enjoyed the 10 years of experience, and I can say that very confidently about my co-founders as well. The 10, 12 years of experience of building products that they had at Zoho was amazing. So it's not coming from a place of frustration or any of this, right? Because we are not an idea-first company. We are a team-first company. So it's saying, okay, we want to learn to build a product company, and and software is our craft. We said, okay, we are going to learn to build that. And then what problem do we pick as a means to that, right? So it's a 20, 30-year journey is how we set out to actually even try and do it. But initially we thought it's like a base camp style, very small bootstrapped company, and we bootstrapped initially, right? So when you think about it through that lens, I think over a period of time you actually it changed quite a bit, because when we started solving the problem, we realized the significance of the problem in a very interesting way, because this particular problem, there are many ways to solve this, to continue to solve it for only small businesses or small businesses with ambition to grow. And when you actually serve people with ambition, to say every entrepreneur who's actually starting a company is like, I want to try and build $100 million business, and then can I actually keep building it to build it into once you get past that $100 million business, you learn to actually dream. Your next installment of the dream comes to fruition. You say, okay, can I build a $1 billion business? How do we, as an infrastructure that is serving this business, learn to scale our product service to actually grow with them, right? That becomes essential if you want to keep serving them. Otherwise, we are just getting them off the ground. And then when they are successful, they actually go on to use something else. Then we realize that our product category is such that then the parameters with which we can actually build the business changes completely, is how we have actually continued building the business. I'm digressing quite a bit from your original question, but for me, this has been to be able to do all of this as people who are leading the organization. Our point of view, the way we actually operate had to change. So I just look at it as it's essentially, it's necessary for us to evolve, scale as individuals if we want to keep up with the needs of the problem, customers, and the organization. It's not a question of do you want to. It's like, okay, if you want to be part of this and play this role, you better be doing all of it. You better scale yourself. And from that lens, I look at it as a very rewarding journey where it's almost like an inside-out cathartic change that we end up going through in the journey of a founder. I'm sure you have done this now a couple of times, right, as a founder. While starting, one of the top 3 goals for everybody is financial independence. Right. And then you realize that when the organization scales, you can actually make that possible for everybody, or most people who are part of the journey can also have that type of financial independence in the company without having to start. That's the benefit of a scaling company, right? Then you actually realize the benefit of actually continuing to build an organization that can serve as a platform for impacting careers and impacting that one of these goals. Financial independence is a goal for people. And also getting the opportunity to continue to build and serve customers in a global way, right? Today, if we did not scale this company, I don't think we'll be having the opportunity to where we would have even dreamt of actually acquiring companies, or the two of us to actually get a chance to work together. Those things wouldn't have happened. And this shapes our perspectives, right? You grow up all over the world, and and I grew up in a single city, right? Till the time I was 17, like till I went out for college. So perspectives are very different, right? And this clash of ideas and getting to an opportunity to work together, all of this actually happens because of the journey. And I'm just grateful for that, right? So you just become almost selfish about wanting to keep this going, because you never know what is in store, and then you are looking forward to where else it actually takes us. And now with the technology shift that we are going through the industry, you never know, that the learning never stops, and then every day is a new challenge.
Right.
So it's fun.
Yeah, it seems to me like one of the biggest challenges for what you're describing has been, as a founder, you have to make regular tough decisions every day to get the product market fit and beyond to scale.
More than tough,
quickly.
I think it's necessary decisions.
Necessary decisions,
to
yeah.
lead.
Some tough, some not. But you're making decisions and you're doing. At a certain point, you're now leading broader teams, and you're more in the Andy Grove world of your values measures the output of your teams, right? So that means providing direction for more talented people to come on board and do more things, and you have to back away from that and let people kind of get there.
Right.
Then
and to go back to the decision part, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully fewer decisions as well. Right?
And fewer
most ideal day is you don't have to actually make any decision.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, Jeff Bezos says that, right? Like in a good day or in a good week.
And the teams are actually able to make all the contextual decisions, and that means like we're in a good place.
Right.
And if we are actually having to participate in that, it means that either they are actually looking for that little bit of nudge, conviction, or endorsement to say, hey, yeah, let's go do this.
Right.
Or that input from a different vantage point to help with it.
Right. What I've heard from you is you're very aware of what an irreversible decision is, right? And that's a moment where you recognize that you need to lean in more or make the decision that can't be easily retracted, right? And I think that's a key thing to recognize. The other is like the AI and what AI is doing to the industry right now. We've seen Facebook with Mark Zuckerberg. We've seen Salesforce with Mark Benioff. We've seen a lot of companies need to radically redirect. And I think this is where you start to see some of the ability for continued founder-led businesses that have reached that level of scale to have the agency and the direction, vision, and conviction to be able to come back in and make the harder changes. And I think that's where I would still say that we're seeing founder-led businesses at mass scale continue to be able to adjust successfully through the changes that we're seeing.
Yeah. I think that the Ps and VCs definitely have seen a pattern, probably by virtue of being able to look at it from a slight distance. I think they have figured out something, right? If you see even the companies that are operating even within the Ps, VCs, right, and public companies. Now you see increasingly a strong emphasis, and Paul Graham put it beautifully, right, about the founder mode, and then actually just being involved. Not to glorify the role of that founder, but it's just that everybody, operators, the entrepreneurial spirit, I think they're not waiting for permission, but actually recognizing those moments, inflection points, and doing whatever is necessary to actually go through that in the greater interest of the organization than yourself, right? Instead of change happening to me, it's actually the change is happening, and then contextualizing it in the and wanting to leave this in a better place, right? To lead and leave it in a better place as a steward, I think is that mode, right? And we are increasingly seeing that happening when people are able to go through it through that lens rather than being a victim of that change.
Ben Horowitz talks in the Hard Thing About Hard Things about wartime CEO and being wartime mode, right? Would you say the industry is in a state of that right now with the AI changes that are occurring?
Correct. I'm not a huge fan of that framing.
framing.
But it's true, right? Which is, it's more of a framework to recognize those what you're dealing with, to lead from the front. Right, there are more times when you are focused on enabling everyone, and then there are times when you are actually leading the change from the front to say, not enough, right? So let's go do it. And so that it's an active nudge. Sometimes some people actually have to do to make sure that the changes are happening with that level of urgency. Right. The business as usual or the current way of doing it is not going to be enough when you recognize that. That's good.
Well, let's sort of shift gears about the industry a little bit here. So, the subscription space expanded very dramatically, sort of peaking during the pandemic. I shouldn't say peaking, but really coming to the forefront during the pandemic when the entire world moved to subscribing to everything from the home. Along the way, that relationship between the software vendor and the buyer sort of really transformed as much of the industry adopted recurring revenue and subscription businesses. What would you say, how would you characterize the shift to recurring revenue businesses and that model shift that the industry went through for a long period of time? And how would you say this is now, what does that mean now in the age of AI and the transition we're making today? Or I should say, when we are making, I should say, the transition that companies everywhere are starting to navigate and recognize that they've just adjusted to the recurring revenue model. Now there's questions again. Is it the recurring revenue model? Is it subscription-based? Is it based on pay-per-use? Like, we've gone through rapid iterations here. I'd love your perspective on this.
Sure. I'm a huge fan of Stripe Press and the books that they publish, right? And one of my favorite books is still that about the human-computer interface. What is that book?
Monetizing intelligence? No.
No. The Stripe Press has this book about the human-computer interface, Dream Machine.
Dream Machine.
It's my favorite because some of it, when you actually read it, you realize that it's also, some of these are also about the history of software as an industry, right? As someone whose career, livelihood has always been shaped through the lens of, through the world of software, right, in a very fortunate position. You look at it through the lens of the history of software. I think all of this is just basically economics of software, right? From the mainframe era to the installed software, Oracle, SAP type of era, to the transition to SaaS right? We have seen various evolutions and the disruptions. And the SaaS, I found the whole subscription model, the part I found very fascinating is the fair value exchange. From at least the balancing of that equation between the buyer and the vendor, right? The software creator, where you don't have to force an upgrade upon customers. How many times we have been frustrated by the previous Microsoft era world where, okay, things break, you either upgrade or you have to throw away the software, right? Because your operating system actually will no longer support the software, or software doesn't upgrade to support that latest version. We actually have moved away come quite far, right? Quite a ways here right now with this, where the vendor is actually thinking about the long-term benefit of actually thinking about it through the lens of a lifetime value of a customer. And they have to continuously earn the right to serve the customer, right? And then the customer has the choice to actually be able to come up with various constructs with which they want to engage with the vendor as well. I think that is good. Now, fast forward, what is now happening is actually even more interesting because, one, the AI access to software is how we have monitored 85%. Like when we say license-based pricing, which is the per seat model, that's 85% of the world of software. Even today, when we look at most of the AI companies that are coming out, there is so much monetization, so much innovation on the product front, but we are still rooted in the world of a seat-based pricing model, access to software model. That's why you still see that 3-tier plan and per user license, right? Which is not in itself wrong because there is a certain level of comfort and continuity.
That's like the basic, the plus, the enterprise versions, right?
And then people are also then layering, okay, here is how I'm actually going to experiment with outcome-based pricing is now beginning to happen, right? And then there are variations how that people are actually trying out. But very quickly, if you look at it through the lens of a software vendor, if you continue to sell through this, within 3 to 5 years, we are going to see that the most scaled, most successful companies are going to have fewer people because software enables that model, right? You don't need, you probably will be able to operate with, like, now we are now beginning to see the 15-member teams hitting $100 million, right? Or a 30-member team doing that. And when you continue to sell through that, you realize that 30, 40%, 50% less revenue if you continue to sell through that seat-based model. What if you sell book closing software with access to, with user-based license? One agent, which is going to work 24/7, can get the job done. Then how do you price it, right? Through that model. Then it quickly shifts to the outcome-based, all those variations. I think we are going to see rapid evolution of this where the incumbents have nothing to lose and they are going to challenge the industry with newer pricing models, while even the Salesforce of the world are actually like trying to keep up with this by being bold and trying to put some things out there, even at the risk of being wrong, because it may erode the margin or it may not be the right model. It can confuse the customers as well. So those attempts are happening. But I think what we are seeing, we are in the middle of is that rapid experimentation phase where that all the urgency around innovation is going to quickly shift to the urgency around monetization that really needs to happen because it's essential for your own survival to be able to thrive in a new world, because you have to figure out that fair value exchange with your customers. And
so as you say this, as companies reach higher revenue with fewer employees, doesn't that mean software becomes more valuable?
Software becomes more valuable. But see, the beautiful thing is the point of reference always changes, right? For the new normal, you always demand more, and customers always will demand more, right? And that is actually a healthy tension that's necessary.
And pricing has always been important, right? So you just mentioned outcome-based pricing. Actually, do you mind just describing what is outcome-based pricing? What would you define what outcome-based pricing is?
Why is pricing important, right? I think to build a sustainable business, ultimately everything comes back to the pricing, right? Whether you are charging enough, are you actually charging enough to be able to serve and meet and exceed the expectations of your customer, right? I think unless you charge enough, it's one thing to win the customer, but to keep the customer and then actually also be able to delight the customer, you better be charging at the right level to actually be able to stay committed to that, right? I think we all have heard the bait and switch model of, like, do you remember that Hacker News article in the early 2000s where companies came out saying, okay, to raise capital, they actually said forever lifetime tier to host
Yep.
software, and everybody took it up. And then they quickly realized that, okay, was it Bluehost or one of those companies, right?
Yeah, right.
And then remember the outrage that happened when within 2-3 years the company realized that that's unsustainable because I cannot keep a forever promise. And then there was a star next to the forever that said, okay, up to 5 years, then I reserve a right to actually change the price.
Right.
And of course, everybody was disappointed. But it was just unfair expectation from the buyer, first of all, to think of that somebody, you pay $1,000, $5,000, and then you're going to get that forever. And then it was also very naive from the company to actually make that type of promise, right? So I think we are adults ultimately in a business, and we all know that there is nothing called as the free food doesn't exist. At the same time, it's almost it is a responsibility to ensure that you are actually getting into those fair contracts where you are able to charge that premium when premium service is necessary, and you're also able to deliver for your own selfish reasons as a software vendor. You want to be competitive. So you also want to make sure that you're actually hyper competitive. So which means you have a responsibility to drive down the cost of operations on your side and continuously build an efficient organization to keep up your competitive advantage while you're also charging enough to build a thriving, sustainable organization that earns the right to keep serving the customers. I think in the middle of all of this is the construct of actually understanding pricing more as a science rather than an art form where you just don't pick a price and then hope that it works, but actually develop that muscle and understanding in the organization where it's not always related to what your competitor is pricing.
So you're basically saying that the shift towards outcome-based pricing and how we monetize is occurring rapidly. And it's a competitive advantage, and maybe even more than that. It might be table stakes to actually get that right. Is that what you would describe?
Another question is, not all categories, not all software is actually will lend itself, or problems will lend itself to the outcome-based pricing.
Do you think that SaaS and subscription models are dead? Is that what that means for the future?
No, I think the future is going to be somewhere hybrid, right, in between. But I think the license-based access to software will evolve into standard contract because ultimately everybody who's buying, right, wants stability to know what's my operational cost, right? Usage-based is the variation of a freemium in many ways where you want access to, you want to have more people try out your product, and then you also want to open up that top of the funnel in a big way, right? And that is actually possible. And then customers who are actually exploring your product and then continuing to consume, not able to guess how much do I need to pay, are able to continue to pay you that, right? But the ones who are actually, look at the most successful customers in the usage-based model, what's happening? When the company tries to, see, there is nothing called as the imbalanced equation between where a vendor tries to actually keep on making more money or like one party, you have to have win-win relationships. I think it is going to coexist. Your most successful customers who are actually paying you a lot are going to come back to renegotiate, or they will actually run an RFP process to find out who is actually, now every category as it matures and the problem goes from a specialized solution to a product standardization of the product to a commodity like the Simon Wardley model, it is going to become a commodity at some point, right? Every category. That's how the value capture happens from a genesis idea that's going into your a custom solution to a productization to a commodity. And companies make money by moving what is a custom solution to the productized standardization to a commodity is how companies make money and differentiate. But very quickly, every time the product standardization and the commodity actually happens, very quickly the new problems emerge and imagination happens in the market. And then now you are actually in a different cycle, right? So this is constant. Becoming commodity is actually the goal as well, right? Making certain things commodity, because like electricity to motors to actually inventing everything that is built on top of it is an evolution of like that standard innovation cycle. Through that lens, if you look at it, of course, you should expect that whatever that you think is premium today is going to become commodity, because your goal itself should be to commoditize and make it standard so that you are able to focus on the next thing that the customer is going to deal with to make things better.
Right. So the implicit point to this as well is that people have to stop guessing, right? I mean, 5 years from now, companies are going to, or even probably 12 months from now, actually, the ability to go from sort of broad-based guesses to much more accurate, tested ways.
I think
of
it's about
capturing
directional
value.
precision, right? Directional clarity and directional precision requires just rapid experimentation and again, the beginner's mindset and an experimental mindset when it comes to knowing that that's how it's going to be, right? Trying to come up with the right answer, I think, is flawed in many ways, right? Because you'll never have the right answer.
Right.
Because it is constantly moving.
So is monetization in the age of AI different? How is it different and how is it the same than
I
monetization
think it's more of the
in the
same,
age
right?
of
So
SaaS?
there is a timeless lesson associated with pricing, right? It's always based on multiple parameters, but what your customer's perception of value, then the competition and the market, right? And how the problem is defined and what does it take for the customer to solve it themselves or through everybody else. So this is a constant, even whether it's a monetization in the age of AI, it's just that the cycle is so much more compressed.
And more complex, too,
More
right?
complex because the inputs are actually multiple parameters. One is, the good news is you have so much data,
Right.
which you can actually use to be more precise about it or understand this and then be able to make much better decisions where it's no longer an art. It can be a science, provided you are leaning into wanting it to be a science. Right? You continue to remain in an art form where you are trying to guess the price, then there is a way. But
Okay,
it's
so-
not necessarily you may not get to the right answer.
It's okay. So whether if you're a new AI founder today,
Yep.
right, that's probably getting some growth and scale, but knows that monetization and pricing is something they have to crack before too long. Or let's say you're a CFO in a traditional company that has been selling for technology products for 10, 20 years in a common way and are recognizing a need to shift. What are the things that you just said there's more data and there's more ability to test? Simply put, like what data do they need in order to, or what should people be looking at in order to start to develop a more efficient, which is ultimately what you're describing, efficient value capture in the pricing? Like what data is it that people need to get their hands on?
At the risk of not selling Chargebee, like
Without
suppress the
selling
urge to want to
Chargebee,
sell
this-
Chargebee, right?
this is
But
like-
let's talk about instrumentation.
Yes.
Right? The type of instrumentation that's definitely necessary and what is at everybody's disposal is all the information, like all the way from standard stuff, right? Whether it's about the customer information, what's provisioned for them, like what did they buy, what have you promised you owe them, which is the provisioning and tracking, which we call entitlements. That's standard stuff in my view, right? And then all of that. Layering on top of this is the usage information is now becoming like it used to be in isolated systems when it comes to understanding it. And today with the explosion,
Like Amazon Web Services has been usage-based pricing, for example.
or in multiple disparate systems where you are tracking the usage. But actually combining this data between the usage and then the whole automation around bringing that data, instrumenting, layering that to be on top of your provisioning and tracking systems to actually also bill the customer. And then using this intelligence to also know, did you price appropriately or where is it surging? Where is it actually, you would like to have more usage, right? And then be able to change course continuously. Because it's pricing itself is a very nice reversible decision, and it should be a reversible decision where it's not set in stone, and you can continuously do that. I think when the instrumentation has the right level of coupling and decoupling when it comes to this information, to be able to make those decisions and be able to quickly experiment, I think that's when either you could be a $500, $700 million or $1 billion company. Size today doesn't matter. Everybody has a mark on their back with respect to the level of disruption you should anticipate and expect when innovation is actually moving at such a rapid pace, right? Creation is actually becoming so much more easier to actually test, throw things at the wall, and then be able to iterate faster. Then what else is actually there that helps you differentiate faster is the level of instrumentation and having access to the data to be able to make much better decision making, and also building that organizational muscle to embrace that type of change. If it takes forever to actually roll out a price experiment, like take the example of even Europe, right? We live in Amsterdam. So Europe, I used to, before even actually going deeper into this market, I used to look at it as, okay, euro is a currency, and then you treat it as a single market. But the purchasing parity differs so much from even within different parts of Europe. And that's very real, right? And then we see some of our customers actually testing like a 10% higher price in certain markets versus a differential price in another market within the same currency. Now that, or trying to say, or all sorts of experiments, right? I'm sure like we can geek out about the topics of all types of micro experiments you can run. But basically, it comes back to, do you try these things once in 6 months or a year? Was acceptable when it was just plain vanilla, mostly subscription models with the little variations between monthly, quarterly, annual. But today, you are actually dealing with, one, the cost of producing a feature is with the AI is actually, while it's dropping rapidly, you're also going to discover that you don't need the latest and greatest model to create every feature. But more and more features are still going to be created with AI-driven models. So which means there is a cost component that's actually at a higher level. So which means first is knowing which features are used by your customers and what does it cost for me to actually serve that customer matters. If not, at a font size that's much bigger, it's still relevant. Then the other aspect, so that is knowing the cost. But then also the second aspect is, what does it take for you to, how frequently do you actually do that as an organization? How many people does it take to change that light bulb? Matters. And I think the instrumentation and then the organizational readiness to actually keep iterating on little changes continuously to build that muscle, rolling out those, communicating, all of those are almost hidden organizational debts when it comes to, can you do you do that often enough to actually build a muscle memory? Or does it take way too long that you want to do it once a year and then even the people who do it are constantly changing, that it feels like a big decision every time you do it? I think the companies are actually having to do that the second way, where it feels like a big decision, are at serious risk of disruption because of the pace of how things are changing.
Right. Very interesting. Well, I mean, a common thread you've had is this constant 1% improvements idea, that to make big changes, you have to make a 1%. Yeah. And, just to put a final point on what you just said, I look at some of our customers, Zapier, for example, transitioning from usage and flat rates to now measuring for their AI agents, like basically outputs, which is what Salesforce has just launched, right? Their AI agents are actually charged for resolved cases. We look at customers like Personio, one of our big AI-based localization service customers in Europe that just released new pricing that's based on usage, for example. And then there's DeepL, who actually do per user per month, and they do usage, and there's multiple models in there. So what you're sharing is exactly what I think companies of all industries and sizes are seeing, is that there are multiple ways to deliver the best value to their own sets of customers. So how does would your guidance be commit to continuous improvement? Is that why you keep bringing the organization's focus around 1% improvements every day into the picture?
I think so, right? I think borrowing that framework is actually very, very helpful, right? Especially because the case of Personio, right? HR management system, specializing specifically focused on SMBs and then like amazing scale. One thing they are doing is continuously deploying new products to the customers, because that's one of the beautiful ways in which you actually scale a software within an SMB space by adding more and more modules to that, right? And it's almost a composable architecture for the way they actually build products and deploy that for the customers while continuously expanding their TAM and SAM, which is beautiful. And then massive respect for the way Zapier is doing it, because you just recognize it from, how long have we known Zapier having a particular type of pricing model where it was based on, we know exactly what they do, right? Connecting systems, integrations. But the moment the technological advancements were available, one of the things that stood out was the speed at which they actually launched their second products. And then iterated on pricing, completely changed the construct of value exchange with customers to say output-based pricing, which is number of zaps, and then layering all the variations that they were able to do. That constant urge and urgency to actually try and launch new product lines, and then having the enterprise pricing model with the agentic and all those things that they're actually launching into the market, while still preserving the DNA of the product-led growth business. And it's just phenomenal, right? I would love to have a seat at the table to actually be able to watch that closely, right? It would be a chief of staff to actually observe how all of this is done. I would love that opportunity. It's just beautiful execution, and there is a ton of learnings.
Keep you here. We won't have you go do the chief of staff for them, but we'd like to keep you in charge.
I think this is a favor I've asked, right? The companies I still have not taken up the offer where Hostinger CEO was kind enough to actually say, okay, BFI on the wall, come over. Right? I still haven't taken it up with him. So these are actually very interesting, right? Because they are deliberately being very scientific about the method of approaching it to say we are going to be very deliberate, but making it lighter decision when it comes to rapid iteration and experimentation rather than making it into a conference room a decision where you are continuously debating it but not testing it out there in the real world.
Right.
I think it's just going back to the basics of starting companies. Validate your idea. Don't keep your idea a secret. The same thing applies to changes related to pricing, product, and packaging.
Well, look, this is, we could dangerously talk about pricing for the next 3 hours. So what I love is that, in the Second Acts themed podcast, clearly pricing and the role of pricing, which has always been one of the ways, whether it's vertical specific pricing, whether it's pricing for new types of customers, has always been a key driver. But I think it seems
it's one
like
of the growth levers, right?
Like
It's just underappreciated growth lever. But
right.
Everybody knows that, okay, keep your customers, charge more from your, or figure out a pricing model. Again, goes back to pricing.
Yeah.
Acquire more customers.
Yep.
Add more products, expand your TAM and SAM, right? And then, so that's another way to, as a growth lever, right? Whether you build it organically or inorganically, is a growth lever. And then keep your customers is a growth lever, right? Yep. And then grow with them. Those are all well understood and executed playbooks. We see that a lot more. But pricing as a growth lever has been underutilized. It's like a gear that you have in your car, but you just don't use.
Yeah.
But now it's actually becoming an essential thing, right? It's a fortunate situation for us to actually be building that capability and have been obsessing about this one problem for a very long time. But we are seeing that is actually a good timing in the market where like AI first innovation, whether you are a large company transitioning into the AI era or AI first companies, this is actually becoming increasingly important.
Right.
It's just the reality.
Right. But let's transition a little bit more. So many of our customers grow actually inorganically. They acquire businesses or products, roll them in, and use that as a means to grow their businesses, get to their second act. You've written about how you've followed sort of the partner build buy sequence. And, I have to admit, I'm kind of curious, like having been a founder who's acquired myself, you acquired Brightback in 2022, RevRec, now a revenue recognition product. Like, how do you think through this partner build buy model and how has that been a key driver for the second act for Chargebee and for many of our customers in the industry?
Right. I think just like the growth levers, right? So the same way when it comes to product innovation, I think organically knowing how to actually incubate new products is necessary. The same way when it comes to being able to acquire capabilities when somebody else is actually doing a phenomenal job serving the same customers, can you actually quickly accelerate the product roadmap is also a learned muscle, right? I think I look at it as one, right? Our framework has been the partner build buy for a simple reason that one, to actually solve any problem, you need a right to win, whether through you have a right to the workflow and right to the ideally also a right to the data is necessary.
So right to win would mean you can uniquely. You have a position that would mean you can more likely capture that than others coming and trying to
solve the problem for the customer. Right? You have a right to solve the customer's problem, right? And they will look at it as favorably as, that makes sense for you to actually solve my problem. Right? Is necessary. And then it's a question of, do you facilitate that with openness as a system? Like, see, for us, the principle has been like API first, open system, allow anybody to build, and there will always be overlaps, get comfortable with that co-opetition that will exist in the market, especially with SaaS, especially when you build the systems talking to each other with API. That's very normal, right? Trying to actually look at every overlap as a competition is a very naive approach to solving a customer's problem. Then when you when you look at it through the lens, then it's very natural to look at it as, okay, now there are going to be partners and then there are overlaps. Having that transparency to talk about those overlaps, healthy overlaps, while still actually not treating your partners as competitors is very important, right? Then it becomes, there are also times when you recognize that, hey, if we solve this problem, it actually expands the scope of our category and makes it a differentiated proposition for our customers. A case in point for us is subscription billing has been our definition, right? And now market is now recognizing this as billing because even our scope of problems that we solve in that has changed from just subscription use cases to like all kinds of models.
Right. So Gartner this year, for example, talked about recurring billing, talked about usage billing, talked about one-time billing, talked about complex billing. So to your point,
so thought leaders,
billing's expanding.
Customers, everybody's now recognizing that billing is a framing of the problem because it's already there. Like its subscription is now getting subsumed, right? From SEO purposes, of course, we continue to call it subscription billing, and all variations of that, right, is one thing. But when you actually, what's the outcome we are still solving is basically through that solving this problem, you're also trying to grow the customer base, right? And that also includes saving the customers, right? And I don't have to tell you about like why that's very important, right? So you actually took that up as a primary problem to say, hey, I can solve this beautifully, complementing it, because none of the billing systems were actually solving it. And we saw the evidence of more and more customers actually having that need. And all our high volume customers, we could see that this is something they would like to see automated. And when you see that, now you can continue to treat it as, okay, let the partner continue to solve the problem. But then you also look at it through the customer's lens to say, would we actually have a much stronger value proposition if you can blur the lines in that the companies are separate, and you would actually look at it as a joint roadmap? Would you reimagine this? Then suddenly the new possibilities emerge where you redraw the lines of what the category is supposed to do. And that is driven mostly by hunches, because there is also a risk of actually trying to be everything for everybody, right? But you look at it through the lens of the right to the data and the right to the workflow, and you are really not trying to stretch too much to define the problem category, but there is you test through the lens of a customer. They are able to see why this makes sense, is what leads to a partner buy build type of a decision, right? And then of course there is the other side where we have made choices to build our own usage-based billing, because for us entitlement was an incubated idea that we have been building with our customers for the last 5 years. The provisioning and tracking combined with billing and the usage data makes more sense than ever to be precise about the pricing experimentation. And we made a choice to say this is how we are building it, right? And that resonates. So there are certain choices where you actually say we are going to build, because that makes the most sense to actually co-design and have a different point of view and approach to the problem solving, versus certain instances when you say, I'm just accelerating the roadmap, but somebody is actually having a much better product with completely different imagination, and I would love to borrow and bring that point of view into the company, is the partner buy.
So does that lend itself, if it's core versus adjacent, to buy versus build, think differently about whether it's a core versus adjacent service?
That is correct, right? And then there are, even in the core, right, there is a school of thought to say, can we continue to partner, right? But when it's actually what does it take for the customer to actually buy two solutions? Does it introduce more friction? Does it actually result in suboptimal solution? Also change the decision-making framework to say, you know what, this is not going to work through partner. It has to be a core, right? It's also a different choice. It's also the context of the market.
Yeah, you've talked a lot about the Atlassian model, right, and how they've expanded by continuing to deliver best-in-class products to the core audience, which is developers, engineers, product managers, and so on.
It's a missionary, right? And one of the things that is not even visible, but it's like the tip of the iceberg, but you never know how much goes behind it. One of the inspirations for us was to think about all our settings. Everything is API first. And there is a reason for it, right? And when you think about the integrated product experience and how you can actually deliver a superior experience to customers, there is so much behind the product roadmap where a thoughtful roadmap, you have to actually invest in some of those which are not visible to the customer. There's always more features to build and ship to the customers. And yet you still have to carve out and define the roadmap where you're actually building those things, like making every setting an API, a driven setting, right? Because it makes the testing and deployment much better for the customers. Or why build a time machine for the last several years to continuously polish it and make a time machine possible? Simply because you can deploy with confidence, implement with confidence, because you can go backwards in time and then move forward and know that your billing system is working really well, right? Those are, I would say, if you only commercially look at it, wouldn't make sense to prioritize those items in the roadmap, but it's just mostly coming from a craftsmanship point of view to say, that matters. If I had that capability, I would really love it in a product. So you continue to invest in it. That's just the way we look at it.
We're coming up over an hour here, so I'm recognizing that we're probably getting to the end of where our audience today is going to want to continue to listen, although actually I've got a lot more I could ask you. Let's talk a little bit about on a different topic entirely, which is the organization's culture, right? I've been through companies, Zendesk, that went from I came in quite early, went through public, There's hundreds of such companies in Silicon Valley and elsewhere where the types of people who build a successful early stage startup can be quite different than the types of people who come into a public company with a different set of work circumstances, skills, and so on. Whether your views on Chargebee or whether your views on your peers in the industry, sort of how do you think about the cultural transition from the early crowd to the late crowd in companies, and what are some considerations or potential red flags, I suppose, that leaders and founders and CEOs should be looking for?
I think the one constant factor when it comes to people you enjoy working with is the fungible, transferable skills, like fungible nature of people. I think is one essential thing that actually makes it much more fun to practice whatever is a craft, right? Whether it's in engineering or in the go-to-market side and all of that. Rather than red flag, I think let's look at the other side, right, which is to say, okay, what makes some people fun to work with?
Yeah.
And you look forward to it.
Maybe like what advice would you have for others? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We're navigating this.
It's a interesting question, right? Which is, as people who, where we started the company to actually more as a point of view, an experiment to say it's about learning to build an organization is how we articulated the attempt to build Chargebee, right? And then we are just fortunate that now we are continuing to. Oh, by the way, it just happens that it's actually 13th anniversary, right, for us as officially.
Happy birthday to you. 13th anniversary. Wow.
So interestingly enough, when I look at it, the inspiration as a completely different industry is when you think about the way Berkshire Hathaway's Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett actually talk about tap dancing.
From Berkshire Hathaway, yeah.
Tap dancing to work. Even in their 80s, the literature was about it. Now, in their 90s, it was still the same, which is just fascinating when we look at it through that lens, because there is we talked about financial independence and people actually shooting for it. And yet, we also we have seen stories of people who pursue that as a primary goal, and then you realize that, okay, once you actually summit, then what do you do, right? If that becomes a purpose, then there is a search for purpose that seems to happen, right? And there is enough people who have written about it to say, hey, sold my company and then I'm regretting it and all and so on and so forth. So, but what makes certain people click, right? Where you enjoy it. I think when you are able to, in an environment where you're able to think about the problem and not about the people, I think that makes it all the more enjoyable. Are you able to wake up thinking about solving a particular problem, or are you solving people? Meaning solving for people. How will this be perceived, or all of that? I think that is what defines a cultural difference between companies. To say in certain environments, it's actually a lot more fun, and certain environments become harder. Then the next question is, startups seem like fun, and scale-ups we somehow assume that the fun goes away over time. And that is not necessarily true, right? If you, again, through a technology lens, when we look at it, we used to accept it as a truism that speed and reliability doesn't go well, right? And then there are enough articles being written, and then if you go deeper, there are methodologies that have now come in the market where you know that you can actually have both. The whole idea of continuous deployment is through that lens to say continuously, like scope it down, test, iterate, push, and you can actually have speed and reliability. All of that can coexist. The same way when it comes to cultures, I think it's about the peer group and having that safe environment in which you are actually able to have fun solving problems. I think is the most defining trait that I look up to in companies, where are they doing it with joy, right? I think that's all that matters, right? In the journey of any company, like the outcomes, financial outcomes, and the milestones are defined by expectations, right? And where did you enter, and then did it actually increase in value, and are you able to capture the value? The same way between the relationship between the customer and the vendor, the same applies to an employee-employer relationship, right? That I think is evergreen. Then the other thing is like, where do you want to keep doing it is always a question of, are you learning and growing, and are you actually feeling challenged, and then are you actually able to stretch yourself where this is constantly happening? Can we create that environment? I just look at it as a constant experiment of actually trying to build that environment is
Well, I mean,
building an organization.
being a leader in your organization, working with you, you often say to me, Guy, is that an inspired problem, right? And I think about like Eric Wan from Zoom, right? And one of his missions in life is to make people happy. It's actually to bring happiness. It's an incredible perspective, and genuinely, your ask of your leaders, of your teams, to think about actively, is this an inspired problem? Is, I think, a source or a seed that helps drive problems, and it helps drive like the resolution. And I know many leaders, many managers often struggle with the balance of needing to draw the best from their teams with also delivering solutions or directions when solutions and directions need to be found quickly. Like, how would you describe that? Is this an inspired problem approach that you take to sort of unlike the creativity of your teams? Or what advice you have, I suppose, on people creating that inspired problem?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think Rajaraman, our co-founder, defines it very nicely, right? Whether are you giving a charter and then trusting the greatness in that person to actually just go solve that once they've understood the charter matters, right? Or does it require constant management? I think any problem through the lens of this is not about a particular type of problem that is actually better or less, right? So if you think about it, any problem can be inspired problem, right? For example, you would think about, let's take the example of a simplest one, like a review management, whether it's about the company's reputation or whether it's through the lens of a customer or through as an employer. Managing that is somebody's partial responsibility, right? You can actually say, okay, that responsibility, you can just report that information is one way. Or if you look at it through the lens of, okay, so why is it the way it is? And what are all the intervention points? And when does somebody, like the reviews are generally given only when in the moments of unhappiness, and it's almost like a scream for help from a place of helplessness to say, I'm so frustrated, right? And then that's when people, generally the natural tendency of people is to go leave reviews from that point of frustration. And then if you let it be as a status quo, then that's all it will be. There are also times when you turn around a relationship, when every time when you feel like there is a opportunity, when there is a disappointment or letdown in service, you definitely lean in and then you turn around a service, and then that becomes an opportunity where those are actually opportunities for delight as well. This is not to engineer the outcome of review management, but actually you look at that problem and then the person who's actually tackling it to say, who are the people who are delivering that moments of delight? The Moments of Truth by Jan Carlson is one of my favorite books. It's such a small book, but it actually maps out the entire life cycle journey of when does an airline, like your experience of a customer start. It's from the time you think about, I want to travel, to discovering your airline, to who you go through. This book was written in the 70s, so the guidelines are slightly different. The moments of truth are different. But today, like all the way from booking a taxi to actually get to the airport, or like all of those, every single time is a moment of truth. And when you think about it as a moment of truth, then suddenly you realize that the opportunities are everywhere, and the moments of delight, like it's a disappointment turning into happiness, are the moments of delight. Or you can engineer it in a way that you are actually also giving small nudge to say, hey, if like in India, there's a board that is very popular in a lot of places, which say, if you have a feedback which is a negative criticism for improvement, tell us. If you are very happy, tell others. Right? It's something like that. Can you actually turn around review into something also like that, where you are giving an active nudge in the signatures of people who are creating those turnaround moments to say, hey, if you really like this, can you tell others? That would you invite more people to be part of this tribe? Is an interesting one, right? Whether it's an employer side or as a customer. Now that definition, once that is there for someone, they will actually look at it as a very inspired problem to solve, to think of it as a designing the moments of truth for the entire organization and then tackle it very differently versus review management and reporting. So two sides of the same coin, but then it can be an inspired problem as well. Like, so my school of thought is every single problem, once it's actually defined through the lens of why should you do it and how does it matter, and are you laying bricks, or are you building a temple, or like building a palace?
Yep.
I think it's the same thing. Like it's a cliche, but it goes back to that. It's just my view, right? And taking the time and patience to define it as an inspired problem matters. Because ultimately, everybody wants to feel important, right? Ultimately, why we do what we do is we want to make a difference, and we want to know that the thing that we're doing is important. So how do we help frame that? And then how do we help them also give them the permission to do everything that they want to do? I think those two things matter for an inspired environment and inspired work.
Right. Which I think is highly relevant for the times right now. Right? Again, as we're really looking at how companies and how everybody's adopting.
Plus, everybody thought
AI.
AI will take all the grunt work and AI is taking all the creative work.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say there's a lot to be said for your combination of inspired problems, bringing teams around them we have value creation programs, we've got OKRs that kind of keeps the company driving towards priorities, which many
It's
companies
necessary.
do. But I think the inspired problem plus the structure is what creates some magic that keeps the company accelerating and keeps people, innovators and scaled people, excited to work and come to Chargebee every day. I think there's a lot to be said here, and it's a big
we are like every company, right?
reflection
All of
on
us.
you, on Raman, and the leadership team on
thank you.
fostering that environment. So.
Thank you. No, thank you.
Well, listen, I think we're close to the time. We're sitting here in Amsterdam right now in this recording studio, and as we wrap up here, I want to sort of take you back 4 years when you moved here in 2021. Sort of what motivated that move, and are there any big personal shifts coming up for you in the next 12 months here?
I think one of my contract with my wife was to say, hey, wherever the journey takes us, we should just be prepared, because it's a once in a lifetime opportunity when it comes to actually having the privilege to build a company like this. And we were prepared for wherever that takes us. 2021 was 2021, right? In many ways, while we are all suffering as a world, right, through COVID and all of that, software, technology, digital businesses, we all scaled, right? It was crazy contradiction, but that happened, right? And then, of course, we scaled the company, and our team was actually growing rapidly, North America and Europe and all of that. And here we were, company with a heritage from Chennai, building a global organization and having customer base in North America and Europe. We knew that at some point one of us will have to move closer to the customers, closer to the teams. But it just happened so rapidly during that COVID time. And then we realized that very quickly, especially building a remote organization at that time, was like, okay, the company's culture will be shaped by all the leaders who are coming in, and this could become completely different if we don't have any influence over how we will actually be able to participate. And that required us, and I say us as the founders, one of us to actually spend more unstructured time getting to know who we are, who everybody is, the entire organization, and treat every global the teams which are actually scaling rapidly to get to know each other a little bit more, to be able to shape and build it into a single, same organization, and not like divisions that look very different based on geography. And today we are vertically integrated rather than geographically integrated as a company, right, when it comes to serving customers. And I think there is a certain beauty to it in terms of internally how enriching the experience is when people get to work with the Dutch directness that everybody discovers from all parts of the world, or the high context society of the India team, as well as the creative freedom and the decision making that comes with the entrepreneurial spirit of North America, right? All of those, it creates a beautiful melting pot, right? And then the Australia team, and then now we have a Dublin team. I think that creates a unique experiences. So for me personally, it was created again through the constraint. I couldn't get the US visa, embassies were shut down everywhere, and I couldn't get the visa to move to US. The initial choice was to actually move to US. And then Netherlands had a window of opportunity where they actually opened up to move here. And I decided to take it. And looking back, it was actually a really good decision, because I'm now in the middle, being able to work closely with the teams in India and North America and in Europe, right? And also be able to travel very easily to meet customers across the globe, and also be able to work with teams everywhere. I think time zone, travel-wise, right, it has worked out beautifully. And I have two boys, 15 and 11. We are very happy as a family. We are very happy that the kids actually go to work, grow up in a very multicultural environment, and very fortunately in a school environment where they really like. the change. So yeah, I think first year we were kept on asking like, when are we going back? Then by second year it was like, can we go back for vacation? And that continues to remain the question. So which is good. I think it's a privilege to be able to do this.
Krish, I'm going to steal a last question from one of my favorite podcasts, Guy Raz, on how I built this in my final question with you, which is, Chargebee is a true success in the industry, and the journey is very much in progress, but you've come a long way. And how much of the success that you've seen so far would you attribute to your hard work and your insight, and how much would you attribute to luck?
I think anybody who doesn't say luck, I think is kidding themselves, right? So there are so many serendipitous moments when we've actually stumbled upon like people that we come across. Like Uber Pool is where like Jermaine joined us, right? He was one of the first sales leaders in the organization who stayed with us for like 7 years, and then now back to being
Uber
founder.
Pool. You met him in Uber in a
Pool,
car.
out of a TechCrunch disrupt, right?
A
Coming out of a
key
TechCrunch
leader of the
disrupt,
organization.
And then it was a cancelled Uber Pool where like we ended up actually, even in the second booking, we ended up in the same car, and the 10-minute ride converted into a coffee and lunch, and then eventually a job offer, and then he also chose to join, right? And then 7-year journey, and he left his fingerprint, right? And there are so many people like that, and everybody actually that you come across in life through the journey of the company, you realize like how many serendipitous moments actually it takes, where it shapes the journey of a company and the people and probably even the investors where we have raised money from and so on. So I think luck plays a huge factor. The only thing is you put yourself in those situations to continuously get lucky? I think that is more by design, where you are continuously pushing yourself to stay in that mode, right? If Shekhar Kirani of Axel did not push me to say, hey, you have PMF, you're scaling. In 2014, he said, go meet customers. It's time to start meeting customers, right? I think naively enough, right, for the first 4 or 5 years of the journey, we did not actually, like by constraint, we did not have the money initially to go travel and meet customers and win customers. But by constraint, it also led to figuring out inbound marketing to actually find the customers. But there was also a time when one of us had to spend time where the concentration of customers are. So I traveled to Brighton, right, to meet Fresh Relevance, and I actually saw them walking me through the code that they had written, implementation code they had written around our API to actually create estimates. That led to us actually saying, okay, we should build an estimate API, and that is going to be critical. And that led to eventually building the quotes module that is necessary because the customers actually have a need for it. If you don't look at it through the lens of a customer, then you don't actually do it. But it requires us to recognize the moments, also making deliberate effort to go, like I was there in London, right? And I would actually camp myself in these different cities deliberately, like a valley. Every year I used to spend like at least 4 trips each time, 4 to 6 weeks to just hang out and working only out of that. I think 44 Montgomery Street. What is that? Montgomery Street, that workshop cafe?
Yep.
That used to be my place all the time, right? And then sitting there and then going.
My first ever job out of college was in that building.
Wow, right? And then I used to just buy a cycle and then go around all over San Francisco just to save money. And then go do these things. So luck plays a huge role, but you also deliberately put yourself in a situation to continuously get lucky.
Guy Kawasaki has a quote that I have on my LinkedIn. It's my favorite quote, and I'd always think about answering that, which is
I'm not surprised, like Guy and Guy.
Yeah, people who get lucky grind it out, and people who grind it out get lucky. And I think there's a lot to be said there. Well, Krish, from the 30-year horizon, the customer centricity, the inspired problems, approaching this from a technical perspective, but very much grounded from a customer perspective, coupled with this sort of monetization of AI age that we're really transforming into right now. It's been a pleasure to hear from your perspective, and I think I look forward to not just the second act, but the third act and beyond here, and do it back with you. Thank you for the time today, and looking forward to all that's to come.
Thank you. This was fun, right? However awkward it was to start. Right? This is fun. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Krish.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody. We hope you enjoyed the conversation today. Actually could have kept going for a lot longer, but an hour and 28 minutes is probably just right on time. So thanks, everybody.